face of new campaign here.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that empowerment campaign.
I think what this is all about is reaching out to the engineers. And in my particular fan base, it's a lot of younger people.
Yep.
And so, engineers just coming out of school. But it's all about making engineering fun.
Yep.
And giving them the tools that they need to create the new designs.
Right. Tell me what your opinion of how this industry is going to look over the next 5, 10, or even further years.
The interesting thing about where we are right now is that it's a maker culture.
Yep.
And people are very into doing it themselves. Whereas, I think in the old days, they would rely on big companies to do things. But now, it's a movement where you have so many open source tools available. And it's not just the realm of people in large corporations. It's opened it up to people at home that want to experiment on their own, smaller companies, startups.
Yep.
So I think that the positioning of Mouser as a distributor is great because they're in the position to be able to give these people what they need: design tools, embedded systems development boards, parts. And it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Because personally as a maker and personally as someone who was a hobbyist and became a full-fledged engineer, I love to be able to exist in this time where everybody can now be interested in engineering. It's a fun thing.
Yeah.
It's a fun thing, and people are just now discovering it.
Yes. And we're seeing people emerging from education and academia now, not just expecting to go and find a job, but actually emerging as entrepreneurs and innovators.
Oh, yes.
And professional makers literally from day one. Are you seeing that?
Well, I lived in the Bay Area for 20 years, and the interesting thing about the Bay Area is that was kind of par for the course.
Yep.
You'd have people coming out of colleges there, Stanford, and they were already looking to do startups on the internet, hardware startups, things like that. I mean, that was just like, I've got a great idea.
Yep.
I'm going to do it.
Go do it.
And now I'm starting to see that that's filtering out into other areas.
Yeah.
20 years ago, when I was just getting out of college, I subscribed to Nuts and Bolts, Circuit Cellar Inc. These kind of really, really specific hobbyist magazines.
Yep.
And in the group that I was in, we would make things, we would have ideas, you'd order a development board, you'd order a microcontroller, you'd program it yourself. That was a very small subset. Now 20 years later, you're saying it's popular. There's a huge community out there. And not only that, in those days, information was hard to come by. Like, I would subscribe to the magazines because that's where I would get an influx of information.
Yep.
These days, kids have it easy.
Yes.
There's the internet.
Type it in.
You just type it in into a search engine, and all of this support comes up.
What would your advice be to someone who is thinking about getting into the industry, and what should they do to really be successful?
It's awesome to have, because these days, it's only been in the past maybe 5 years that science, technology, engineering, math have been a focus.
Right.
And as an engineer, I remember a time where it was totally uncool to be an engineer.
Absolutely, right.
And now, through Mythbusters and through shows like Big Bang Theory, it's become popular to be an engineer.
It's
People
cool
are discovering
again.
that it's cool.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's cool again. I would say it's cool, period.
Right. But they're realizing that it is cool.
It can be a fun thing. It doesn't have to be this really dry thing all about math.
Right, absolutely.
People can now see that it's about solving problems.
Right.
And to be able to get in to elementary and middle school students and introduce this to them early,
Right.
that's going to stay with them for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
And hopefully translate into more scientists and engineers.
Right, right.
I think that the best way to do that is to give them something that's accessible. And, I've been involved with FIRST, which is it's a national robotics competition
Right.
for inspiration and recognition of science and technology. And what they do is they have a competition, but they go to elementary and middle schools, and they use Lego and
right, okay.
Lego Mindstorms, as a matter of fact. So it's something that a lot of the young people are familiar with. Like, I would have been all over this when I was their age.
Absolutely.
And then they introduce elements of programming and problem solving.
Okay.
And in that way, you introduce them to the fun aspects of engineering.
Right, right.
Like,
and they can see how cool and intricate it really is.
Yeah, it's like on Mythbusters, we taught science by taking it and wrapping it in a delicious candy coating of explosions and car crashes.
Right, right.
And so young people would watch the show for car crashes and explosions.
But they were
learning science.
Right.
So that's
most of the time probably didn't even realize it, but
in spite of themselves, they learned something fun.
Right, right. What's your favorite thing about being an engineer? What is it that makes you love the industry and want to be, a part of it?
There are certain aspects of engineering that are so satisfying. It's solving a problem,
right.
Like getting to a solution. I'm very mission-based.
Right.
And so for me, having a problem and finally figuring it out, because a lot of these problems that we're faced with as engineers, they're not easy.
No,
they're
absolutely
very
not.
complicated.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a whole team of people to figure something out. When you finally get to that conclusion, that solution, that's like the moment for me where I'm
Right.
like, yes, this is why I do this.
It's so satisfying
That's exactly
to
why
finally get there and realize that you've accomplished what you were hoping to.
Yeah.
What about your partnership with Mouser, and how did that come about? And
I got a phone call from my agent, and he's like, "So Grant, we got an offer from an electronics distributor. I don't know if you heard of them. They're called Mouser." I'm like, "Of course I know Mouser." And here's the thing. I've been on TV for 9 years.
Right.
Before that, I worked in special effects for 9 years.
Wow.
Before that, I was an electrical engineer.
Wow.
I have a degree in engineering.
Right.
So it's something where I came out of school, I needed parts. I ordered from Mouser.
Right.
And as a customer, there's always three things I wanted. Are the parts in stock?
Right.
Are the parts affordable? And do they treat me nice?
Right. Right.
And Mouser did all three. And that happened really early in my career. And that's why I stuck with them.
Right. Right.
And so it's like that brand is like, oh yeah, that's a great brand. They were nice. If I need parts, I'll go back and order.
Right.
And
absolutely.
so when the opportunity came in to partner with Mouser, it's like, I'm an engineer. They need someone to be a spokesman.
Right.
Perfect fit. Because
Right.
I already speak the language. In my career in special effects, I've worked on R2-D2, the Energizer Bunny,
Right.
Jeff Peterson from the Late Late Show, and all these robots have Mouser parts in them.
Wow. That's awesome.
So, 20 years is a long time to be associated with the company. And
Right.
in that amount of time, it's been a great relationship, and now it's really exciting to be able to take it to the next level.
Absolutely. What is it about Mouser you think that separates them from the other distributors?
They are capable. So, on their website, they've got a theme going of time travel, and the idea behind that is that the only way that you can get parts before Mouser is if you were going to time travel into the future. because they have strategic partnerships
Right.
with various manufacturers, so they're able to provide the design engineers parts before anybody else.
Right.
If you and you know, if you're working on next generation products, you want
You have to
the
be
newest,
right.
the newest generation of the part.
The newest, the best, you know, the most efficient.
The most efficient, the most memory, the fastest. And a lot of times in a design cycle, you don't have a lot of time.
Right.
And particularly with semiconductors, your design has to start with the semiconductor and everything else
Right.
flows from there.
Right.
And if you can get the newest and the best, which is what Mouser can provide, you're one step ahead of the game.
Awesome.
Tell me about this big announcement with Mouser and your new role working with them.
So it's the whole campaign is about empowering innovation together. And basically what we're doing is fostering interest in electronics and getting the design engineers all the tools that they need. And personally, I have part of my fan base, what makes this a really great association is that for 10 years I've been on TV, but it's been the kind of thing where young people have grown up with our show, which makes me feel a little old, but
Right.
they've grown up with our show, and a lot of people that are college age come up to me and say, "Oh my God, I grew up watching you. I'm an engineer or scientist or
Right.
a chemist or a physicist because I saw your show and I thought that engineering was cool." And so now these people are graduating from college and becoming design engineers, and they're going to be needing parts and tools and development kits. And they're going to say, "Oh, I know Grant. Oh, what's Mouser? Mouser can provide all those things." Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me, what are some of your key, favorite projects you've worked on, memorable projects?
Oh yeah. Energizer Bunny, the current generation of bunnies. When I was working at Industrial Light and Magic, the Eveready Battery Company had a dispute with their supplier for the Energizer Bunny puppet.
Uh-huh.
And as part of his contract, he owned the physical bunnies. So after this disagreement, he was like, "Fine, I'll take my bunnies and go." And so this company that had spent all this money developing their icon suddenly had no icon. So they came to Industrial Light and Magic and said, "We need new bunnies." And we had to start from scratch. There was nothing.
Okay.
So my portion of that project was I had to provide the bunny's beat,
Uh-huh.
all the control electronics. And the bunny doesn't just beat the drum. And before that, they were like, there's two things that you have to do for this bunny. Number one, the drum beat has to be consistent. Before, they had a guy with a metronome
Uh-huh.
and two joysticks going like this.
I see.
They're like, that's not good enough. It has to be electronic. So I programmed an 8-bit microcontroller.
Okay.
I soldered the board myself,
All right.
and I interfaced that to the radio control. Second thing is it has to run on Energizer batteries.
Ah.
44 AA batteries is what the Energizer Bunny runs on. But in addition to beating the drum, the bunny has to do a full sequence when it stops beating of twirling the sticks, and it has to be able to go right back to beating. So that's all sequenced by a microcontroller.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. R2D2.
Oh, yeah? Tell me about R2D2.
R2D2, the current generation of R2s, the lighting on the robot was drawing a lot of power.
Uh-huh.
So I looked inside, and from the 70s, what they had was a metal box with a car lamp inside of it, like a 12-volt
Uh-huh.
lamp, and two rotating color wheels. And so the displays in R2D2 that kind of sparkle,
Yeah.
they had fiber optics going to these rotating color wheels, and that's how they did that.
Ah,
So I took
interesting.
all that out, replaced it with two LED arrays, programmed another
Yeah, yeah.
microcontroller to do a rotating PWM sequence, so that it
that's
would
cool.
look kind of organic. And not only that, I sequenced to do the red-blue display
Yeah.
on the front and the yellow-green display on the back, kind of flash back and forth. They had a switch that, on the wheel would turn, it would
And
hit
then
the switch,
and then change.
and yeah, it's changed. So I got rid of all that, and the microcontroller sequences all of that.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So what has been the biggest project you've ever worked on? Largest?
Oh my goodness. For me, personal projects, I built a 650-pound, six-legged robot the size of a small table. And the idea was to make this something that I could ride. Like, I don't know why, but I had seen like little kits, like different companies made tabletop versions that are servo-based that would walk around. I thought, that's neat. Let's make it larger.
That's great. Sit on it, have it take you around.
Now it doesn't work 100% yet.
It's in progress.
It's in progress. It's a long-term project. So it's been going for about 7 years.
Okay.
Couple more years I should have it.
Do you think you'll put it in any of the robotics competitions out there?
I think it's probably a little too fragile. Like I had a fighting robot in BattleBots. That one was a tank.
Right.
It had titanium on it. It was solid. This one's more of an art type robot. So maybe at Electronica 2 years from now, I'll be riding that around the Mouser booth. And,
There we go.
And if
It's
it's
a
here,
challenge.
You can have a ride.
Hey, perfect. That
All
sounds
right.
great.
Most people are familiar with your recent career, but I looked into some of your past and I was happy to find that your first job out of college was really interesting. What did you do?
I was an electrical engineer. I worked at the THX division of Lucasfilm in consumer electronics. I would blow up loudspeakers, amplifiers, and surround sound controllers.
So did you have much experience with this when you were getting your degree, or was it mostly learning on the job?
I, in my junior year, went and became Tom Holman's research assistant. And Tom Holman is the TH of THX.
Oh
So
wow, that's fantastic. So
I worked in the sound department at the cinema school, and Tom would give me papers to read. So I was familiar with that whole world.
and I understand you've done a lot of robotics builds as well.
Yes, both personal and professional. It's been, I think for me it's been a lifelong love affair with robots.
And what's your favorite part of robot building?
Bringing life to something that, it's really neat. You can create, you give the illusion of life to something that was inanimate before.
I think there are far too few people that look at electronics and say, I want to know how that works.
Yes.
And really, it's just getting their foot in the door. It doesn't take that much to learn about it. And I'm wondering if you can share maybe some of your earliest experiences with playing around with electronics and maybe beginning to learn more about them.
Oh yeah. I started out playing with Lego when I was very young, and I always say that Lego is like the entry drug to engineering because it's a system. There are rules, but it's also modular. So you can take those rules, you can solve problems by configuring things in different ways, which is essentially what engineering is. And from there I progressed to taking the wheels off my Hot Wheels, so they were just hot, and then taking things apart. And then I got an electronics experimenter's kit. And the very first thing is, let's sort resistors. The boringest thing I could possibly imagine. This is before the whole maker movement.
Right.
This is before all the resources that kids have today, if you're interested in electronics. But by the way, it's an awesome time to be a kid who's interested in making things and electronics.
Absolutely.
But the very first thing was, let's sort resistors. So, that's stupid. Let's go to lights. Lesson number 2 is, okay, well, we've got an LED. I'm like, awesome. I hadn't sorted the resistors, so I was like, I'll just plug it in. Blew out the LED, and that was it for the kit. And so I was interested in electronics, but I didn't do anything with it until much later. And then I picked up the Forrest Mims
Yes.
Radio Shack books, and those are awesome because it's very accessible. He tells you only what you need to know, and then from there you can take those blocks and reconfigure them and make things. And so that's really where I started becoming a hobbyist.
The show has a lot of effects, so what do you like most? Guns or explosives, cars or even electronics?
Actually, I love them all. My personal favorite is the robots. Like I am the kind of guy who likes to make things, and my favorite thing to make are robots, mechanical things. But of course, the explosions are pretty fun too.
So, is it true to say that you are a maker?
Absolutely. I have been from the very beginning. And for me, building things, particularly mechanical things, it's a problem-solving process. And the best part is finding that solution and building the thing and completing it.
Have you seen anything here that's really impressed you, or is it just you're here and you're just getting all of that viscerally right now?
Yeah, for most of the show, I've been here at the Mouser booth,
Right.
talking to people, talking about our partnership. So I haven't really gotten to walk the floor very much, but just absorbing the energy that we have. It's awesome.
Well, this is literally, you could almost call it a mecca for engineers. This is the place where it's only twice a year, this event, and it's
Yeah.
the largest electronics conference in the world. The big buzzword is the Internet of Things. But like the blind man and the elephant, it depends on what your point of view is. Sure. How do you see it?
For me, I think our single greatest resource these days is information. When I first started out as an engineer 20 years ago, it was hard to come by information. You had to subscribe to a bunch of different magazines just to get these little bits of information because there was no internet. And now, young people especially, can go to a search engine, they can go to YouTube and type in, I want to know how to light up an LED. Like if, a young person interested in electronics, and they can find out exactly how to do that. And it's so quick, and it's so easy, and it makes it so great to push technology forward when you have access to information like that.
That's a very good point. Well, that's one of the big things behind the Maker Revolution, right? I mean, I think that's a phenomenal event.
Oh yeah. Just in the past few years, there's been this whole maker revolution. People who, make magazine dedicated to people who want to create things on their own, not just to do it yourself, but really exploring things that interest them. And with an open source culture, all of the information is being shared. You have a community of people and a wealth of information that's literally at your fingertips.
Exactly. All of these portable devices are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Cars are getting smarter, homes are getting smarter. Do you see any adoption issues? I know you deal with the public, you help educate the public on all of these things.
Oh yeah.
Do you see any growing pains in it, or do you think it's going to be a relatively smooth rollout on all of this stuff?
I think that in general, people are resistant to change. Now, I work in technology. I know technology. I usually embrace change. And it just takes, I think for me, a little cool factor. 10 years ago, I would not have believed that my pocket would have a powerful microprocessor in it with a glass touch interface that would connect me to the world and be my phone, my camera, my internet, everything all at once. And it just took making that thing cool and accessible for people to go, oh man, I want that. I need that. And so I think that's going to be the key with all these technologies like self-driving cars, is to make it something that is not scary for people, but that it's something that's cool And if you have that, then they can say, yeah, I begin to see that. I think that's cool. I want that.